So what have we got here? This is a pint of Best Bitter. I've called it Northern Soul Bitter because it's got a little bit of Yorkshire heritage in terms of the recipe and the yeast that I've used. It's loosely based on a clone recipe for Timothy Taylor's Boltmaker, and the yeast that is in this is the Wyeast West Yorkshire Ale, which is supposedly the Timothy Taylor strain. That's a really good yeast and one of the best parts about this beer, in my opinion. Yeah, I've been playing around this recipe for a while and I'm really pleased with how this has come out, so I thought I'd share it with you guys, and yeah, hopefully if you do choose to make something similar you might get a few tips from the recipe and so on. So yeah, let's go through the recipe. I'll do a proper tasting at the end, but just a little sip to wet the whistle. So recipe wise, as I said, it's loosely based on a kind of Boltmaker clone that I've been playing around with for a few years now, so tweaked it a little bit, but I think that's kind of where the most of the idea for the grist and the stuff comes from. We've got 3 kilos of Maris Otter, so pretty standard English base malt to use for a Best Bitter. Then we've got some torrefied wheat, so good option there for a little bit of head retention, about 5% of that, 200 grams. We've also got some extra dark crystal in there, so about 180 grams, which is about 5% again, and a little bit of amber malt as well, so about 150 grams of that, which is about 4% of the grist. That's it for the grains. Now you can make a really decent Best Bitter with even simpler grist than that, but in maybe just a base malt, a little bit of dark crystal, or a little bit of darker malt, like a roasted malt or something like that. But I find that if you want a really nice kind of malt complexity, that sort of 4 or 5% addition of one of those sort of lightly roasted malts like amber malt or biscuit malt is a really good thing to put in and just give you a little bit more depth of flavour in terms of the grain bill. So that's why that's there. I think it works really well. Hopping wise, we've just got some Challenger and some East Kent Goldings in there. So the Challenger is just for bittering. It's bittered to about 33 IBUs, which is relatively high for a fairly low starting gravity, but it is a bitter. I think you want to have some fairly firm bitterness in the flavour profile, and it just makes it actually more drinkable for me when it's not too sort of sweet and cloying. So yeah, the OG original gravity is targeted at 1042, and according to Beersmith, the yeast should finish at around 1012, 1013. I find with this particular yeast that it does actually attenuate a bit higher than the predictions in the software. So certainly on this one, it came down to about 1008. So rather than being about just under 4%, 3.8 or 3.9, I think was the target, it actually works out about 4.2, 4.3%. So to get that bitterness, we've got 22 grams of Challenger going in at the start of the boil, and then nothing else until 5 minutes towards the end, where there's 10 grams of East Kent Goldings, and then a steep Whirlpool addition for about 15 minutes after that as well, with 30 grams of Goldings. So relatively simple hopping, and no dry hop on this one, so it's all in the boil and in the steep. Then just the Wyeast 1469 West Yorkshire Ale, which is, as I said, is supposedly the Timothy Taylor strain. Now that yeast, I think, is really key to getting the most out of this recipe. I'm sure it will work really well with some of the more common sort of English ale yeasts, like your SO4s and stuff like that. But This particular yeast I think works really well, gives you a really good balance to the beer, finishes dry but still gives you a lot of that kind of malt flavour, and leaves quite a nice yeah, kind of rich taste to it as well. So the beer is very moorish, but it's not too sweet or full bodied, so good balance, definitely balances the hops and the malt, and has some nice esters to it as well, so there's a little bit of character brought in there from the yeast itself. So yeah, that's the recipe, and I've got a bit of brew day footage, and then we'll come back to the beer at the end. Okay, so let's have a little look at the finished product. It's on the other keg fridge that I've got, so it's at 10 degrees, nice sort of cellar temperature, relatively low carbonation, so I think I've carbed it to about 1.8 or 1.9 volumes. There's still a reasonable head retention on that, although it's not massively carbed. Clarity wise, it is, yeah, pretty much as crystal clear as you can get. This yeast does drop really nice and bright, and for this particular style of beer, you know, I think clarity is a good thing. Certainly not a you know, militant on the haziness in other beers, but for a best bitter, particularly if you want it that sort of amber or coppery colour, if it's hazy then it is going to start to look a little bit you know, like dishwater sometimes. So clarity is good in this case, and really pleased with it on this beer. On the aroma, it's just bags of malt. Don't really get much of the hop on the aroma, but definitely big kind of biscuity malt aromatics coming off of there. I think the amber malt definitely contributes on the aroma. And then flavour wise, more of that kind of biscuity. No, it's almost like a kind of like hobnob biscuits or something like that, so quite a yeah, rich kind of biscuity flavour to it. Bitterness comes in as well though, so it's nice and dry, good bitter finish, very moorish. As I said, I'm really pleased with how this beer came out. For me, like the, you know, level of bitterness and the flavour to it and the drinkability is really what you want from a best bitter. So yeah, I'm going to enjoy drinking this one. I may even think about putting this forward for a couple of competitions or something, and see what other people think about it. But yeah, that's the Northern Soul Best Bitter. Cheers.
I'm the dude. So that's what you call me, you know? That or his dudeness or Duder or, you know, El Duderino.